right, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Robert Stein, and I'm going to be going over an internship I just completed with Shumla over my last semester. I've been volunteering and interning with Shumla for about 2 years now. I was originally a volunteer, and then I was an intern, and now I'm back to being a volunteer. So originally, I kind of bumped into Shumla just by chance. I had already committed to coming to Texas State, and just a family friend happened to be in contact with the executive director, with Jessica, and introduced me and arranged a meeting. So I had a quick Zoom meeting and was able to go over kind of what is Pecos River Style, what is Shumla, and I was very fascinated, and I immediately was asking, can I volunteer? What can I do to help? And unfortunately, at the time, there weren't volunteer opportunities. So I emailed back about every few weeks and said, hey, just checking in. Can I come in and volunteer? So eventually, after about 8 or 10 months, I heard back over the next semester, so fall of 2023, a year after I'd come to Texas State. I got an email that summer before, and they said, hey, we do have a volunteer opportunity opening up if you want to come in and help out. So of course I said yes. I drove down straight from my grandfather's ranch to meet up with the folks at Shumla, and I felt a little silly walking in ranch clothes and introducing myself, but immediately the Shumla team was very friendly and welcoming. They showed me around the office. They showed me the prints they have of the Pecos River Style art, and I got to meet the team and people who I would be working with for a while. At the time, it was David and Deanna, the preservation archaeologists. So I met them over the summer, and then about a month later, I came in and started my volunteering with Shumla. So if you're not familiar with Shumla, I am going to be targeting my presentation more towards a student audience, towards people who might be interested in doing an internship like this with Shumla in the future. So just a heads up, but Shumla does rock art in the Lower Pecos region of West Texas. So this map I have up here is primarily the region, the Pecos River, Devil's River, the Amistad Reservoir, and there is Pecos River style rock art down into Mexico, and I'll be covering a little more about what is Pecos River style, but Shumla works with the stuff that is north of the Rio Grande. And Comstock there on the map is where the Shumla West Texas office is. So I've gotten to participate in some field work and go out there and help out and stay in Comstock. So the picture on the left, as you can see in the background, it is very dry and arid out there. The map looks nice and green, but that's very misleading. It's a lot of exposed limestone and chaparral, lots of plants that don't want you to be near them. That'll poke you first chance they get. So it's pretty rough country. And originally, when I started as a volunteer, I was scanning in a photo collection from the 80s and 90s of just as far as I am aware, a vocational photographer who came out and took photographs of the Lower Pecos region. So that is just photographs from Pecos River style sites and from the area. Some national park activities were being documented, and there was a lot of trash cleanup and stuff. So I got to sort through those, and I was scanning them in on an old scanner. There was lots of great photos of Pecos River style and just the areas around them and the park and the rivers. And also there was a lot of not so great pictures of trash cleanups and empty beer cans lying all over the ground, and I had to sort through those. So I was working with the preservation archaeologist. I was working with David Keim, originally scanning these in. And after about 8 months of doing that, they asked me if I wanted to work on graphic databases. So I'm going to explain later on what exactly a graphic database is. But if you're not familiar with Pecos River style, this is Halo Shelter, which is one of the most famous Pecos River style sites. So like I said, these sites are found throughout the Lower Pecos region. And looking at this, you may be inclined to think that it's not as large as you might expect, but this is a massive panel. The figures are human sized, which is consistent throughout Pecos River style. And it's very fascinating because the style dates back to about 6,000 years before present, all the way up to 1,500 years. So that's thousands of years that it's been around. And superficially, there hasn't been a lot of research done on this yet, but as far as we can tell, and as far as I know, there's no distinguished subtypes. So over that 5,000 year period, there is a consistency in the motifs being presented, the styles, the way it's painted. And one of the most remarkable things about this is it's compositional and the paint sequence is intact. So what I mean by that is at every Pecos River Style site, as far as I'm aware, the paint sequence is consistent. So the black would have been laid down first, and then the red, and then the orange and yellow and white. So on a panel like this, if you're anything that is black would have been put down first. So some of these are very complex figures, very intertwined, lots of intersections. So it had to have some kind of pre-planning, and that's how we know it's compositional and created in a single event, probably not a single day, but how a mural would be created today is the same thing. Someone created this over a short period of time in some kind of intense production. So through my work with Shumla, I've had some really great opportunities to learn a lot about Pecos River style. There's a couple of other different styles in the region that I've also gotten to learn a little more about, but Shumla primarily deals with this Pecos River style. And just volunteering and interning, even before I was really working on the details of it, I got a lot of opportunities to get education about it. Deanna, the lead archaeologist, would come in around when I started with a big stack of papers and said, "No pressure, but you should read these by next week or sometime." So I got to read through a lot of those, and a lot of them did not get read and sat on my desk because I am still a student. But that's how I got a good foundational knowledge of the Pecos River style. But with panels like these, like I mentioned, there's a lot of intersections, and some of them will have, for example, a red line going all the way through. So if you have that paint sequence I was talking about where the black is on the bottom, red is on top of that, and then the yellow, if there's a red line going all the way through, you can actually track that it goes over all of the black of every single figure and under all of the yellow, just to give you an insight into how it was created. And that is something that will provide more details that, once again, I'll go into that a little more later. But back to those graphic databases, that's what I was creating for Shumla for the majority of my volunteering and internship time. So with rock art, you can't curate it, you can't permanently store it. And so the best way to have permanent documentation is to create a digital documentation or a graphic database. So this is one of the first ones that I created. So what you're looking at here is a graphic database of E2. That is labeled on the top left, and that's that figure that comes all the way across, over, and then down on the right. So the naming convention system within Shumla is E, A, and Z, and that stands for enigmatic, anthropomorph, and zoomorph. An anthropomorph is any figure that has human-like characteristics. It's not necessarily a depiction of a human, but it has the characteristics. Oftentimes it will have the arms sticking out or the legs, different head shapes. And there's lots and lots of variation and different types that you see throughout Pecos River style that I got to learn a lot about just working with David and Deanna. So in order to identify something as an anthropomorph, it has to have at least 3 identifying characteristics. So if you're looking at a checklist, it has to have a head shape or hands or fingers, something like that, but 3 characteristics that you can use to identify it as an anthropomorph. And similarly, a zoomorph is a zoomorphic figure. It's something that represents something with animal characteristics. The most predominant one you can see on this panel is that one on the right. That is a panther or a mountain lion or whatever you want to call it. It's unusual in the fact that it only has 2 legs. As far as I'm aware, that's the only one that I've seen that has 2 legs instead of 4, but it is a depiction of a panther. And that curly tail is a diagnostic feature of those panthers. the lines coming off of it are called piloerection, and that is one of those diagnostic characteristics. So if we see that, we can say, okay, there's probably a panther here. Another common feature that you see is the speech breath. That is what's coming out of the mouth of that zoomorphic figure there. And we can see that in lines or dots or something similar to that. And that just represents like a breath or saying something or casting something out. And the third category is an enigmatic figure. That's something that doesn't fall under the category of zoomorph or anthropomorph. And it is just anything that doesn't fit those characteristics goes into the enigmatic category. So this line that we see coming across and down is one of those enigmatics. And a lot of things that you see that are enigmatics are like man-made objects or tools. If they're associated with an anthropomorphic figure, they're considered to be part of that figure. So if you look at the top left, you'll see that large dart, and that's supposed to represent an atlatl dart. So it's a spear dart. And in the bottom right, there are the bulbs with the lines and the points on them, and those are also atlatl darts. And we see different hunting tools depicted and similar things like that. It's sometimes more abstract, but there's lots of things that are, you have to have a trained eye to understand what you're actually looking at. And immediately through my internship, they were helping to educate me on what is what and how do you recognize it, how do you identify it. So getting into that graphic database process, when we're creating a graphic database, we start with creating the color layers. So let me go back to that one I was just showing, that the color layers there that I have are on E2 and any figure that has an intersection. And that's because if it has an intersection, and in this graphic database, we want to be able to measure and make sure that there's consistency in the paint layering through something called digital microscopy. And I'll explain exactly what that is and what it means later on also. But most of these figures just have sketches around them because there's no intersections with E2. But on this one, I've also done other graphic databases for other figures in this panel. So for this illustration, Dr. Carolyn Boyd created the illustrations, the color illustrations, and the sketch is me going through and sketching over the top. And this is at another site called Satan Canyon Gallery. So when we're starting with that graphic database, this was the first time that I was doing the color by myself. So as you can tell, it's in pretty poor preservation, which is why it's important to create these graphic databases, because these sites are continuously deteriorating. They're exposed to the elements, sometimes exposed to water, and the paint will fade or chip more and more over time. This one was very challenging to be thrown in to my first one, creating the colors for myself, or creating or documenting. So I started with the same paint sequence that it would have been painted on. So starting with the black, and you can see I had to color match the best I could. So I took the darkest point of black paint and I sampled that color, and then I illustrated it over where I could find the paint. And I did this on a big drawing tablet with a stylus, going through and tracing it. And we use something called the de-stretch image, which is a enhanced color saturation image. And I'll show an example of that after this illustration. But after I completed the black illustration layer, next is the red. That's what would have been painted next also. So this is that anthropomorphic figure in the middle and any figure that is intersecting. So can you all see my mouse here? I just want to double check if I'm pointing to things. Whoops. You all able to see my mouse?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I have this across here, and then you may be wondering why this is illustrated if there's no intersection. And that's because this coming across on the top right here is called a power bundle. And that is some kind of projection. As far as I've been explained it, it's a projection of the power or a projection of some kind of essence out of a figure. So this figure right here is what this power bundle is coming out of. And it comes across, cuts through the anthropomorphic figure, and then terminates in this bulb over here. So that's why this is illustrated on the left. And then these birds here are the zoomorphic figures. I illustrated these as well because there's this one tiny intersection point. So you can imagine I was very happy when I found that, and I had to illustrate all of this. No, I had to illustrate all of these because of this one little intersection point. So I went through and did the red on this one, and then comes the yellow. So once again, doing the color match, and the orange is also, I've included it with the yellow. It's usually grouped in with the red, but a lot of times it's considered its own color. It just depends on when the database was created, because the newer ones usually categorize orange as its own thing. So you can see this orange coming up on the top. And lastly is the white. The white is definitely the most challenging one to work with. The white definitely takes a trained eye to be able to actually recognize it. And when I first started working on this graphic database, working with the archaeologists, they would come in and look at it and say, oh yes, there's the white color coming through here. And I just have to look up close and say, oh, okay, sure, and illustrate where they pointed. But after a while of working on it, I actually was able to recognize the outline and see where there is the white paint. And also it's limestone, and the white limestone, especially the more recent spalls, look pretty similar to the white paint sometimes, and it's pretty difficult to tell. But that dashed line that I have in there also represents a break in the paint where we're pretty confident that there is paint there, but there's not remnant evidence of it. So the last thing that comes in is the wall features. This just represents how the wall is interacting with the figure. So as you can see, I have that labeled up in the top left. The spalling is the limestone as it accretes with the water. The layers will flake off. The limestone will come off. And I've illustrated it where it interacts with the paint or just the major spalls on the panel. And then the dashed line is natural features. So that is some kind of ledge. I've kept in the ones that interact with this figure. A lot of times those natural features can actually interact with the panel. So sometimes there is some kind of meaning relating to the rock art with the natural features. And then the gray is the obscuring. Obviously it's out in the desert or the chaparral, and the accumulation of the sand and the dust and the wind builds up as an accretion on the rock art. So when you're looking at it, you can actually see over the paint, there's a layer of this desert staining. So the gray that I've illustrated here represents the heavy areas of obscuring. Sometimes there's also smoke coming in from these rock shelters because over time, if there's fires being lit to cook food, or earth ovens over time, that will leave a soot residue layer on the top. So removing that background layer, so you can see my sketch here. Everything that is not intersecting still gets sketched so you can see it. And then the main intersecting figures have that color. So this is what a complete graphic database looks like. And when I'm adding the natural features, it looks like this, just on that white background so you can see it. So while I was working on these graphic databases, it was the exact same thing that the archaeologists were working on. We were oftentimes working on the same sites. So we would be going back and forth, and I got to get direct help from them. And once I'd been working on it for a while, they actually would ask me to look at what they were working on to get an extra set of eyes on it. And these graphic databases aren't just illustrations of the rock art. They also have data contained within them. So in the layers of the Photoshop file, I would add the carbon sampling or that digital microscopy I mentioned. And once again, I'll explain what the heck that means later on. But this is a D-stretch, that color saturation that I was talking about. This is just one example. There's lots of different kinds of D-stretch that will show you what kind of color saturation you have in certain areas. And this one, for example, highlights the black and the red really well, but it can be a little misleading because the natural limestone looks the same as the yellow paint here. So certain ones will show you better what exactly you're looking at. So going through those, looking very closely, zooming in and looking at the high resolution photographs that Shumla has documented. That was how I created this illustration as best as I could, true to the rock art. So moving on from that one, I created this one here. Um, and if you can't tell, it is in extremely poor preservation. There is very little paint actually left here. So if you are looking at this and wondering what is going on, that's what I was thinking at first too. And I spent quite a bit of time illustrating it. So I just want to see if anyone wants to take a guess in the chat who didn't already see me talk about this panel, and if anyone wants to guess what exactly is going on here, what kind of figure this is.
That's quite a challenge, Robert. I
Here, I'll
think
show
you might have to
y'all.
tell us.
Yeah, I'll show y'all what it is. This is a panther figure. So I spent a lot of time, especially looking at the head. The archaeologists hadn't quite discovered the shape of the head. So I went in there with those de-stretch images and looking at those high resolution photographs, was able to determine the shape of most of the figure. Obviously, the hind legs are not there, but there probably is hind legs just because of the remnant paint. And this likely also had that curved tail going up that I was talking about. Um, and then it has an intersecting figure here. This enigmatic figure is a T-shaped figure. So it is potentially an anthropomorphic figure, but as I mentioned, if there's not enough diagnostic characteristics, we can't categorize it as an anthropomorph. If you're familiar with the white shaman, it would have a similar head shape with the arms coming out. There's even potentially an elbow adornment, which is something that we see on a lot of these figures, and the body coming down. But also, it could be two completely separate figures. It could be this yellow and red coming across, and the black and red coming up and down. So, spending enough time working on these graphic databases, I had the time to develop an eye for it. And going out into the field and actually being able to look at it, I was very surprised by how well the skills carried over from just staring at a computer screen for 20 hours a week. But this is the microscopy. So this is a digital handheld microscope that you put up near the wall, and you can actually see the layers of paint in what is called the photomicrograph. It's a microscopic image that the it's called a dynolite will generate. On the right, this is not one that I took, so that's not from this panel, but it's just you can see if you're looking that there's the layers of the red paint over the black. Um, so I got to actually do this in the field, and but before that, I got lots and lots of training on it in the office. Obviously, we didn't have any rock art to work with, so I got to take microscopic images of like the wall paint and the couch. So not exactly the same, but going out, I already had a pretty substantial amount of experience with it before they actually let me go near the rock art and take the microscopy. So the purpose of the microscopy is to determine the layers of the paint. So when we're looking at an illustration or some kind of rock art panel, once we take the microscopy, we can determine where the layers of paint are and what's over what to make sure it's consistent with that Pecos River style paint sequencing. And it takes also, like everything else in rock art, it takes a trained eye to be able to understand the microscopy and what exactly is over what, especially sometimes the red and the yellow will look very similar and the white will look exactly the same as the limestone accretion. But once you have intersecting figures and you've taken microscopy on it, you can determine a composition of the whole thing. And because there's proof in the microscopy that it's actually layered correctly, or I should say coherently. So looking at it like this. And I also wasn't just doing the office work and the microscopy. I got to participate in fieldwork 3 times with Shumla. The first time I went out, I was just a volunteer. That was in the summer of 2024, so last summer, and I got to go to 3 sites on the Pecos River and the Shumla Rancher Steward Barbecue. That's what's on the left here, and I got to interact with a lot of the landowners. This Rancher Steward Barbecue is for the landowners who are supporting Shumla or giving them access to their sites. So I got to meet a lot of really cool people who have rock art and are working to preserve it. And actually, a few of the people in that photo are people that later I would go out and work on their land with Shumla. So you can see that embarrassing photo of me taking a big gulp from my drink there. And then on the right, that's a picture in front of the Pecos River from when I went out as a volunteer with that crew. We did documentation and photography. Unfortunately, I can't share photographs from that because it's on private land, but it was a spectacular panel, and it was extremely detailed and complex. So going out for the first time, that was my first field archaeological experience. And aside from being a wonderful learning experience, it was a really fun time. But also, I got to learn tons of skills that are applicable in general to archaeology. And I got to go out again last October. This time I was an intern, and I got to go to a scouting and survey trip to a newly acquired property on the Rio Grande. And purpose of this was to search for a new rock art site in this area and to document the ones that had already been discovered. So while we were going and looking around through this canyon, the real archaeologists were scrambling up into a cliff, looking into a cave with no rock art. And two other interns and I found a previously undocumented Pecos River style site. So that was definitely the highlight of my internship, was to be able to say that I helped discover a completely new Pecos River style site. It was in pretty good preservation as well, especially being in the canyon wall. It probably washed out a few times, but it was in great preservation. It was really fascinating, and we got to do the whole baseline documentation. So that's gigapan images, which is just a high resolution image that is a composite of lots of images put together. We got to do figure photography, and I was an intern, so I got to fill out all the forms, but I also got to participate in the photographic documentation too. And the most recent field work I got to do was actually just a couple of weeks ago. I went out to West Texas, and we went to a site called Red Elk, and we were doing some secondary documentation. So baseline had already been done at this site, and it was over a sinkhole. So if you're wondering why I'm in a basket and that little machine, it's because the rock art is over a sinkhole, and we were put in that basket to be suspended over the sinkhole and look up close at the rock art. So you can see there, that's the panel Red Elk. And that's when they offered me up as a ritual sacrifice and put me in the sinkhole. No, actually, I went down there to take photographs of Dr. Boyd doing the microscopy of Red Elk here. So you can see there's a lot of details here that are hard to get on first glance, but there's an anthropomorphic figure. There's some deer coming around through here, and obviously the large elk figure is a very interesting panel for a lot of reasons. But I got to do microscopy here and actually look up close with that digital microscope. So that was a really great experience. Got to do the photography, all kinds of photography with different cameras, doing the documentation and working with those. We brought out D-stretch maps in the field to be able to actually look at the figure on paper too. And you may be wondering why I have photos of food here in my archaeology internship, but this is actually one of the most important aspects of the whole thing. This is J&P's Bar and Grill in Comstock, Texas, where the Shumla, West Texas office is. And after a hard day of field work, we'd go in there and we would get some large burgers and lots of fried appetizers. And it's about the best way to recharge after being out in the hot sun all day long. And I got to spend time with not only Shumla people, but people in town who are related to Shumla and do things with Shumla. So that definitely was one of the very fun aspects of my internship. And going forward, I've actually done some other field work with Shumla, not with Shumla. I've done some field work over winter break. And this was a student fieldwork expedition I went on doing shovel testing in Fort Knox. And a lot of the skills that I learned with Shumla, even though I wasn't really doing dirt archaeology, we were doing rock art documentation, is things that were directly applicable as far as field methods go. And this was a student experience. Most of the people were there to learn. And despite not having done any dirt archaeology, I felt like one of the most experienced people on the crew just because of what I'd done with Shumla. And going forward, I'm getting the opportunity to do two field schools this summer. I'm doing the Texas State Field School and the TAS Field School. So I'm hoping to round out my skill set with more actual excavation experience relating to what I've learned from Shumla. But overall, I got to learn lots and lots of rock art documentation skills. And these are things that I'm not going to get to learn at field school, and they're not exactly widely taught. And the things that I can apply to any kind of commercial archaeology job. I got to work with some really wonderful people, just spending time with everyone in the Shumla office. A lot of these people are people who I'd like to continue keeping up with indefinitely, and not even just the Shumla folks, but everyone associated and on the periphery, and the landowners I got to work with. Everyone was just so welcoming, and throughout my entire experience, it was very much learning oriented. Even when things were very busy, there was time taken for me to actually learn new things, learn what's going on, participate actively. And as I mentioned, most of my experience as an intern and a volunteer is directly what the archaeologists were doing. So I definitely felt like part of the team, even though I was just an intern. It didn't really have that hierarchical dynamic. And I'm really excited to continue volunteering with Shumla. As I mentioned, I'm still a volunteer, and I just love participating wherever I can. So overall, it's been such a wonderful experience. And if you're an undergraduate student who's looking for an archaeology internship, especially at Texas State on campus, I highly recommend it. I was actually the first current student intern. So other student interns were full-time over the summer, but I was the first one who was part-time taking classes and doing my internship. And I was the first intern here in the San Marcos office. So I got told many times I'm the guinea pig. And I definitely felt that at certain times, just working it out, not necessarily in a bad way, but in a way that what I was working on was defined by what I wanted to do and what I wanted to focus on. So overall, it was just such a wonderful experience, and I'm very grateful for it. So that's all I have. If anyone has any questions about my internship experience.
Well, I can say we were very, very happy to have you and still are as a volunteer, certainly. And this is the first time that we've had an intern present at a Lunch and Learn, and I think it was highly successful. I'm sure everyone agrees. To hear about the internship program and also see your incredible illustrations that are going to live long after the internship ends. So thank you so much. But yes, if anyone has a question for Robert, please go ahead and take yourself off mute and go and ask him.
Yeah.
I have a question, Robert. This is Kelsey. I'm the curator at Shumla. What advice do you have to other students who are interested in doing internships in general, but maybe interested in working with Shumla?
I would say the biggest piece of advice that I have is be persistent. Um, I know that's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason. And like I mentioned, I asked to volunteer here many times before I actually had that opportunity. And a lot of times, especially with my internship, the best thing you can do is just ask, and the worst thing someone can say is no. It's never personal. It's more just about what's available, especially if you're passionate. So
Great advice.
my brother Casey asked a question. How do folks speculate and come to determine what different sections of rock art represent? Some of it seems pretty obvious, but other parts I have no idea what to make of them. That's a very good question. And at this time, interpretation is something that is still being, it's never going to be 100%, of course, because we can't talk to the people who created the art, and that would really be the only way to completely understand it. But the best way to actually get interpretation at this point is to talk to descendant or related communities. There is a community of people in Southwest Mexico called the Huichol, and through discussing with them what their interpretation or understanding of the rock art is, it's helped with a lot of understanding of what is potentially represented. So, good question. What is my education goal and what degree am I working towards? I'm an undergraduate student at the moment. I'm a senior. So I'm hoping to graduate next fall. I just have to take a couple more courses. And then after that, I intend to take a break to work and get more experience in the field. and then come back and maybe not necessarily to Texas State, but to get a graduate degree at least. Yeah. Thank you everyone for the congratulations here. And thank you everyone for showing up too and listening. Definitely, I'm excited to talk about it. If you came to my presentation at the anthropology undergraduate conference at Texas State last week, this is the third time I'm presenting about my internship to a group of people. So I appreciate you fully explaining everything for those of us who might not fully understand all the terms discussed. Yes, thank you. It's definitely a lot of terminology, and I've definitely felt that my first week in here. There's a lot of words being thrown around.
Well, thank you everybody so much for joining us. We love having this Lunch and Learn series, and right now we're planning for Kelsey to present in May. So we'll be updating everybody on what's coming up in the months to come, and please join us back here again.